The future lies at the hands of women. And by that I mean the outcome of the future is largely in the hands of women. Women have a profound amount of say in where we will be 1,000 years from now. To an extent, they've always had quite a bit of say, but not as much as today. There are these two divergent paths that I see up ahead. One turns us into something resembling a node on a network. There was a time when we used to believe in the individuality. We're taking that now to an atomized extreme where you will lose your individuality and surrender to a machine-like structure, to civilization, and become node-like. A kind of human where you can't really distinguish very much the difference between a man and a woman, nor can you distinguish the difference between a man and another man. People will be very interchangeable humans, where individuality doesn't really exist. That is the future we are headed toward, unless women choose differently. And the alternative, the other option, is to go back to an era before the individualistic era, the era of lineage and family, and the tiny little small empires that formed around a patriarch and a matriarch. See, there was a time when family meant something. Your last name meant something. Your lineage meant something. Because the family, the institution of the family, was kind of like a miniature kingdom in a way. And of course, there were families of varying degrees of power. But it essentially democratized power down to a very granular level, a level of the family. And there is more than a sufficient number of men who would love to live that way. But there is an far insufficient number of women who do. And so whether or not we go the direction of the node or the direction of the family really lies at the feet of women. And so what do women, and of course not all women, because you just need a critical mass. You just need a solid number of them, enough of them, for this to become the path that we take. I would say maybe 60%. Which leaves, 40% of women could be following all completely sort of alternative trajectories in life. But you need a real solid, over half of the population of both genders to move in this direction in order for that to be the path that we take civilizationally. And what does that look like? Well, it looks like something that is really a tough sell. It's an easy sell for men, but it's a tough sell for women, because there's a lot of surrendering that a vast number of women would have to do. you'll be lucky these days. Number one, if a woman marries a man, that's fortunate. Number two, if she decides to take his last name, that's becoming even more rare. And the modality we would have to switch toward is one where women fundamentally submit to a hierarchy, where she is second in command to the man, and she takes his last name. She still has quite a bit of power and influence over the family, perhaps more so than he does, because he's busy engaging with industry and engaging with the world, engaging with things that are outside the family in order to provide the resource necessary so that she can actually build a legacy. But that dynamic, that old school dynamic, is so rare now that what has happened is that the power that used to be contained within these tiny little kingdoms, these tiny little patriarchs and matriarchs, has now been completely diffused and distributed to the institutional level. And that is continuing to be consolidated further into larger and more centralized forms of control. And that is even taken to a whole other extreme, where now even those forms of control are being subsumed themselves into a greater system, a system that treats every individual like a node on a network. It's a very different kind of humanity, a very alien, almost machine-like form of humanity. And there are more and more people who want that. But there's no shortage of men who want to go the other way, who want to have their piece of land and build a home and family and have a wife who stays home. Of course guys want that. I mean, come on. Who doesn't want to feel their individuality maximized and feel empowered, feel like their life is a source of empowerment, right? Of course men want that. But women do not see what's in it for them. And which frankly, the answer to that is the exact same thing. You get the exact same thing. You get to be empowered by that system that you build with your husband. You get to have a family. You get to have land. You get to have property. You get to have, as a family, far more agency, which I think the degree to which that would be something a woman would enjoy or not would depend on the kind of man she finds. But I think if women chose that style of life, they would be far more careful about the kind of man that they would find. I think if a woman has made up her mind that she's going to take her man's last name, she's probably going to be a lot more discerning and careful about any man she brings into her orbit. But instead we've gone in the opposite direction of having no interest in taking the man's last name, if even settling down with him. Or if you do, being of the mindset, well, this is temporary, I'll move on to someone else in like 5 years or so. That engenders an attitude of disposability and caring very little about who you pair bond with. So it's an attitude that ultimately dissolves itself. It's a societal, civilizational solvent. It just erodes away at the fabric of civilization and society. And that's where we're headed, at rapid speed. Now, it could be stopped. We could take this fork in the road and go the other way. But the steering wheel is really in the hands of women. It's in the hands of women. They don't want to. They don't want that. Now, I may be wrong about the percentage. Maybe a critical mass would be 30%, but I don't know if that would be strong enough to shift the current that we're in. Because the movement seems very strong. In order to really make a strong turn, we'd need a large percentage. And I think there's no shortage of men who want that kind of life, frankly. Now, of course, the argument I think that women would make is that men also have to step up to that role. But men, they step into the role that is asked of them. Men are becoming what is most likely to be seen as favorable by the women around them. That's what men are becoming. If women demanded a certain kind of man exist and refused any sort of pair bonding with men unless that was the kind of man, well, then men would step up to that plate. Men they adapt. They can be a good soldier for the government. They can be a good husband for a wife that demands it. Men step up to the role that women want them to be. But I see more and more women wanting to find a child man. Someone that kind of satisfies a maternal instinct more than a wife instinct. So men are very simple in that sense. Very malleable. Men are very malleable. And so I insist changing the course and trajectory of history is in the hands of women. And unless there's a big enough movement, it's not going to happen. Now, that doesn't mean that you couldn't have other kinds of lifestyles, right? There could be plenty of that. As long as there's a critical mass of that other archetypical male-female dynamic, masculine-feminine. So those are my thoughts for the day.